Thanks very much for that. I'd be a lot friendlier if you let me invest in you. That'd be fantastic. Thanks for having me here today. Awesome. I love the Tanda team. I do remember Payos. In fact, I think you went to our second or third river pitch event, and it was the worst bloody pitch I've ever seen in my life. Great to see the crowd here and have a few chats before I come up here as well. I'm going to be talking a little bit about workplace culture. I'm going to get there a bit of a long way around. I'm not your soft and cuddly boss that you might have nowadays. I grew up in a bit of a different time where we could be a bit more practical, I suppose. I also, though, I'll probably take a little bit of a departure from the very positive introduction from Tasman and Alex, so that'll be a bit of fun. Well done on the workplace.com acquisition. It's amazing that you guys have acquired a 97-year-old company. I'm keen to see how they got that domain name 97 years ago, though. That's awesome. And my slides will be pretty boring compared to Kate's. But just on one thing I want to sort of say that was actually pretty bleak. I mean, the regulatory framework in this country is something we've done to ourselves, because every time we say the government should do something about that, a page gets added to the regulatory burden. So don't blame the government, blame us. It's in our power to change that. You know, the worst part is, and it was quite stunning in the slides from Kate, but I think the first two categories of small employers, there was 2 million businesses between 1 and 4 employees. They can't afford to actually enact a lot of these regulations, so therefore they don't grow. And the biggest thing that a large company wants is small companies that can't grow and compete with them. So regulation benefits larger companies. It never ever benefits a small company. We've got to stop, having these self-inflicted injuries on ourselves. Right. A little bit about me and why you should care. You need to know who you're listening to. You can get great value from outright fools and ignoramuses. I'm up here. But you only have to you have to know that that's what they are. You can at least not do what they're saying. A lot of this talk is about culture and my experience with it. My experience tops out at employing about 100 people inside a company. It's already 10 is far bigger than my experience level. And the biggest company I've invested in has got a little over 200 people, probably about 250 now. And I've had nothing to do with employing of any of those, bar a few interviews with the C-suite. So you need to know my background. I actually started as a soldier at 15 years old, something I'm exceptionally proud of. It was a privilege to be allowed to carry a rifle for this country. I actually want the word soldier on my gravestone after the word father and husband. So I treat that as a large part of my heritage. This talk today, we'll talk a lot about workplace culture, but the regular army probably has very little to add to workplace culture. Its central task was to close with and kill or capture the enemy. Downstream from that are the values that diggers hold true. First being that of being accepted as a digger for a start, something that's not granted lightly. The hard work, teamwork and mateship also count. Military culture is hard to replicate and probably shouldn't be inside standard businesses. Very few other businesses have the role of killing and capturing as a part of their day-to-day activity, thankfully. I grew up in business in the late 90s, in the mid-90s. The Australian industrial landscape was a lot different pre-dot-com one, essentially. We weren't that long out of the recession we had to have. At that stage when I started, we'd only had 3 years of uninterrupted economic growth. We've now had over 100 quarters of said uninterrupted economic growth. Staff were cheap and, to be quite blunt, compliant. They had to be. The memories of the 80s were very fresh. This is also expected before the age of the current entitled workforce, where employers were not expected to feed and pamper their employees. Along the way, I also worked at Google, where I saw firsthand the then supposed best workplace in the world. I talked to a lot of business leaders and startup founders and CEOs who want to have a workplace like Google. Google has lots and lots and lots of revenue. Don't emulate them unless you have exactly the same amount of revenue. It takes a lot of cash in hand to play 20% time, unlimited annual leave, and the other garbage that comes from the dot-com darlings. My time is now an investor. I see lots of things. I see good teams and I see bad teams. A great team doesn't actually mean a business win. Businesses still need to be attacking the right problem at the right time with the right mix of people with the right technology. Teams alone just do not do it. I've managed staff and workplaces in small private companies, small listed companies. They are different, and your mileage may vary for some of the information I put across today. Right, I'm not very techie apparently. So why care about the workplace? And there's a lot of obvious answers here with respect to costs and other reasons. But what business is it do you actually want to build? Do you want a business that focuses on the bottom line? which is very worthwhile because without a sustainable bottom line, the business will fail. Profit is an excellent reason to get out of bed in the morning. With profits, your problems become a lot more higher quality. Do you see yourself as running a company like Google with their approach to the workplace they have? If Google had such a good approach to the workplace, do you think things like the global war drive would have occurred, where the Google streetcar cars drove around the world collecting every Wi-Fi detail they possibly could and putting it in long-term storage? What level of arrogance thought that would be okay? Maybe when you blindly think your company can do no evil, then you can actually do no evil. I worked at Google and they do some things fantastically well. All hands meetings are very well done. Goal setting is exceptionally obsessive. They have an overactive meeting culture because work does not get done in meetings. If the workplace gets a bit too free and easy, I encourage you maybe to Google some of these examples if you're not familiar with them. If the workplace does get a bit too free and easy, then maybe more like Xenophytes. The hyper-growth led to a myriad of staff and regulatory issues, probably heading back to Kate's example. What led it to become the regulation skirting section, the stairwell type of workplace that it turned into? When the rot's really bad and sets in from the top, you get Theranos, where management and even the board bullied staff into submission in what was essentially a large fraud. On the really bad, the really downside with a bit more of an Australian story, staff engagement with the business can get as low as the ice cream incident at the Coogee Beach Hotel. And if you want to find out what that is, I suggest you Google it before reading. There's a litany of business horror stories that can be highlighted, but ultimately you need to have some clear view of where your business and workplace, where you want to take your business and workplace. Businesses are made up of people. Do you value people? Do you have a workplace that talks in terms of hires and resources in lieu of the word people? Do you throw people at problems? Culture is such a big talking point, and then there seems to be a competition to who has the coolest, best, whatever culture. What does it try and hide or cover up, though? Is culture a plan B for something else you're not getting right? How bad is the other stuff that you need to actually plaster over it with some culture? Culture is a lazy way to do business in lieu of harder decisions. Does it help your brand to have a good culture? Interesting, the 7-Eleven. Do people still shop at 7-Eleven despite the fact they've had massive battles of workplace culture? Amazon reportedly has a terrible culture. Doesn't affect their value. I come from telecoms, and when you control the network, you can be shocking to your customers and your staff, but people are captive to your product. How much does culture really matter? If your product is being commoditized, your customers don't really care how the sausage is made. How much does culture matter? How much can culture really translate into brand? You can get carried away with culture to win competitions, the best workplace for females, minorities, or some other mythical oppressed group. Are these the right reasons to set your day-to-day actual work standards and work ethics? In times of low unemployment, you need to attract and retain more staff. Losing employing staff costs money, real money, we know this. Not just in skills drain, but also in the loss of intellectual property, defocusing, and the cost to actually refill those roles. Can culture be boiled down to an expense line, or the lack of an expense line? If you run too hard at culture, some things can be really hard to wind back. When growing a company, always be wary of things you can't remove without massive blowback in the HR department. Overly grandiose titles. When you employ your first accountant, maybe call them an accountant, not the CFO. You can't take away a grandiose title. Corner offices and car parks are other dangerous ones. You retract those and you'll actually find yourself with a massive HR problem as people lose morale. But maybe the 9-to-5 access to a barista, office massages, comfort dogs, crying rooms, etc. are also hard to wind back. Not that you shouldn't do these things. After all, who doesn't want sort of 9-to-5 Belgian chocolate fountains in the office? But take it slow. Measure out these things slowly, and also measure them in respect to real-world workplace improvements. I quite like Simon Sinek, if you haven't seen his video. It's called Millennials in the Workplace, and his opening is fantastic. They, millennials, are accused of being entitled and narcissistic, self-interested, unfocused, and lazy. But entitled is the big one. And we see a lot of this. I saw a lot of this 10 years at Google. It's nothing quite new. Unfortunately, in many cases, millennials are the feedstock we get to work with until the world stops using these failed parenting strategies. How much do you pander this population of workers is up to you. At some point, the bow will break. It's a global environment. We compete against others without such hang-ups and demands. I think there's a better way to build culture. There's some standard ways to start. I'll assume that you all pay staff appropriately. Staff are actually based in a market. You pay the wages. We were lucky in my first business in Adelaide. Adelaide paid about 10% below Brisbane. Brisbane paid about 20% below Sydney. So everything is set by the market. We were lucky. We were an employer of choice in our industry, so we get to pay really poorly. You can't say that nowadays. Food. When I was at Google, they had the Google 150 rule. No Google could be more than 50 feet from a mini kitchen, and a mini kitchen was like the best thing you've ever seen in your life. This also led to the Google 15 rule, that in your first 6 months at Google, you put on 15 pounds of weight. But the US has no stupid fringe benefits tax rules, so that sort of carry on gets a lot easier. The expectation was that people will stay longer in the office. And it's a perk of the business. I'm not too sure if it's true. In the Valley, it's very different because it's now a market. If you don't give away free food, you just don't attract you don't attract the appropriate staff. Something that might be relevant for stand-up parties. Do you put on free booze at work? Is it the first Friday of the month? Is it the first Friday of the week that you do this? Aside from the actual management issues around encouraging this sort of behaviour, it can be good, but not every person will place value on this. And especially once you start having families and getting a more aged workforce, the value and the ability to participate diminishes ever so greatly. Lots is made of furniture in the built environment at work. And look, you need a nice place to work, and it's lovely turning up to a nice place to work. But once again, this become an arms race. This can cost you a lot of money for very little value. And just remember, a large desk is nothing more than a single level horizontal storage space. Probably the most inefficient piece of storage space you'll ever get. So it can be a bit of a slippery slope for how much you develop culture through the built environment in some respects. But, are slippery slides and donut vans required? It's probably a good question. A lot of workplaces now give to charity and community organisations and maybe even use this as a part of a marketing spend. And the modern workforce seems to want their employer to be as soft and as cuddly as they are for some reason. My approach is that we work for shareholders, and I'm a huge fan of employee participation at the capitalisation table. In that world, more profit is better because it gets handed back to their shareholders, and the shareholders make their own decision on what they spend it on, what charity they give it to, which I think is the appropriate capitalist response. I'm good for the use of social services to promote a business or to retain staff, providing you can actually quantify what it costs or the expense that it avoids. That's very important because this stuff can get really expensive really fast, and it's really hard to unwind. Management lines. When I was at Google, I reported to employee number 8, who was actually Larry and Sergey's doctoral professor at Stanford. Why you'd employ a doctoral professor, I've got no idea. Sorry, John, I've got no idea. I know university. But it was the weirdest thing, and everyone could do anything. It was one of the worst management environments I've ever actually been in. Structure is actually a good thing. If left unchecked, a flat management structure can look like Lord of the Flies with the kids running around with pigs' heads on stakes. If you're a fan of an efficient workplace, then management structure is vital. My service background informed me a lot on this. Everyone in the army got a chance to participate in the formulation of that plan. You got a voice. But by God, when the boss said, this is what we're doing, you rolled your sleeves up and you mucked in, and you got the job done. Until it was done, there was a more final outcome, you might say, or the boss got you a new plan. Flexibility. Flexibility is a curse and something I grind my teeth on all the time. If Ellen, my PA, says she'd know about this. I hate flexibility. You should turn up, work 40 hours a week in the office. I'm an old boss. It's hard not to see that. But when it's done poorly, it's terrible. I saw it done the worst at Google. I had no meetings Friday, so people could work at home. I never found someone working at home on Fridays, and I called them. They're at the cinema, they're with the kids in the park, which is great, but hey, it's a work day. You're getting paid for it. They're getting their car fixed, or God knows what else. And the worst part is it starts to breed resentment in the workplace. No one knows what people are doing. They don't know how to find you, how to get things done. Your mileage here will vary. This is me. I'm a 48-year-old guy with some pretty traditional views. Flexibility inches grow into miles very, very, very quickly. It's something that I've found I've just had to hold the line on. Pride. Do you want to have staff to have pride where they work in? I think this is very important. I visited a great business in Caloundra called Helimods. One of the best things about it, there's lots of good things about Helimods. The best thing is the founder's a guy called, he's got the coolest name ever, Will Shrapnel, which I think is an awesome name. But they modify large helicopters for mostly casualty transport and evacuation and some other bits and pieces. The workplace, it's an aircraft hangar. If you've been in an aircraft hangar, they're almost as filthy as a vehicle mechanic's garage. But this place you could do brain surgery in. You walked in there, and it was a place you wanted to be. Everyone had a smart, albeit casual uniform on, dressed uniformly in a uniform. It was clean. I sense the real pride in that workplace, born from effort and discipline. These guys are modifying $30 million flying machines for casualty evacuation. It's a pretty serious business. That's not push and juice, right? But that was a place that you wanted to be a part of, and you sensed the pride. That was an important thing, and it was definitely came from the boss Will. I prefer to see culture built with results. Once you start winning, the natural culture in your firm can start to breathe and be seen. Start with winning. When business wins, the wins compound. I've never ever quoted the Bible before, but Matthew 13:12. Whoever has will be given more, and they will have an abundance. Whoever does not have, even what they have will be taken from them. Winning compounds. This is what happens when you start winning more. It's easy to be generous and flexible when you've got success. If you're winning, you never need to have those silly conversations and silly treatments of your suppliers, and more importantly, your staff as an emergency cash flow reserve, because that's the day your workplace culture falls to pieces. And given the spate of high-profile salary issues we've spoken about today already, this is just not something you do in Australia. You don't go near the salary thing at the moment. They're calling it theft, probably as it should be, but I'm more on Kate's side with the occasional accidental issue. You need a work day that's absolutely professionally fulfilling, and you need those work days more often than not. Hopefully this will be every day, but chances are you cannot give everyone in your firm a fulfilling work day every day. It's sort of like having a pleasant day every day with your kids. Some day they're just ugly little people you don't want to be around. Planning for perfection will only see you fail in that respect. All right, empowerment right to the end. And this is sort of getting in the tandem wheelhouse as well. People need to know what success looks like. It comes down to how much you tell them. Do you expose them to the full P&L or some other relevant part of your business? They need to know what's required to win. You need to let them win. You need to give them realistic as well as some stretch goals. Reward them with incentive plans and don't renege on those when they win. I see that way too often in sales incentive plan organisations where a salesperson does too good and the bonus gets adjusted. Remedial action is okay and desirable. This is mentoring training and it's needed. Turned around staff can be as valuable as a turned around customer. They've been pulled back from the brink to be an exceptionally vocal advocate. Don't throw away people too easily, but burn the dead shits when you uncover them. Sorry, Kate, I can't say that, can I? Well, follow the law when you burn the dead shits, okay. I like the book, The E-Myth by Gerber, which is, I think it's up to its 14.3 print. Lots of common sense advice about process and procedure. Building a good solid foundation, and let the ethereal things like culture be guided by a positive go-ahead winning attitude. You need tools, and this is what Tender does, right? They do lots of tools. Make your staff stay easy. Make your business prosperity easy. You should aim for the fastest workday ever. That is, a person gets there at 9 in the morning, does their task, whatever they have to do, looks at their watch and goes, oh my God, I have to leave, it's now 5. That's the best thing you can do for your staff. Make it fulfilling personally, make it fulfilling professionally. And obviously pay them right. A boring day does not go fast. A boring day is soul-sapping. Boring days lead to business problems. If you want to find out what your real culture is, get your team winning and let them know they're winning. Winning leads to a real culture. Thank you.